Welcome to Grassroots Iowa, conversations at the crossroads of faith and politics. I'm your host, Jeremy Higgins, and I'm coming to you from right here in the heart of Iowa, where faith, family, and freedom still matter. Today, I'm talking to a man who's lived those values out loud, from the baseball diamond to the boardroom, through personal trials that led him to Christ, and into the state government where he's cut waste and served with conviction. He's a husband, a dad to two boys, a credentialed minister, and now a Republican candidate for governor of Iowa. I'm so excited to welcome Adam Steen to the program. Adam, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for coming.
Jeremy, it's an absolute honor to be here. Thank you. I'm fired up. I'm excited for this.
You know, I'm excited too. I have been all week. I love getting into these conversations, and really, ultimately, these are the conversations that matter, and that's really where I want to start. You know, right out of the gate, tell us a little bit about your faith journey.
Yeah.
You know, when did you get saved? How does that impact, your vision for public service? Kind of unpack that for us.
Yeah, I love being able to share that story because I think that's kind of your point. That's the intersection of what really matters. It's being able to share your testimony, share your faith. And I was born in Burlington, 1980. So that's aging me, however they want to be aged. But I grew up in a half Christian home. So my mother has been a believer her entire life. My father came to faith at 50 years old. So as I was growing up, I saw, and I don't mean anything negative towards my father here, but I saw him not walking with the Lord. Right. And my mom would take my brother, myself, my sister to church all the time. And what happened to me was I became saved at an early age, call it 8 or 9 years old or so. And I was kind of, at that time, I just believed in Jesus, and did all the stuff. But again, I kind of watched my dad not living for the Lord, and I don't blame him, but what happened to me is I excelled in sports. And at a very young age, I was put into teams with older kids. So at 14 years old, I'm playing with 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and traveling, and I'm seeing what 18-year-olds do. And at a young age, I fell into that lifestyle at a very young age. I had to grow up real fast because I'd be traveling by myself. My family, wasn't around because I was on different teams here and there. But then I saw, so I fell away from the Lord. And then one thing leads to another. I see my dad come to the Lord. And I was thinking, okay. And I'd been praying as a kid, just, Lord, I want dad to be saved. I want dad to trust you and love you. Well, then I see him do a full and complete transformation, commitment to the Lord. He became an ordained minister through the Assemblies of God. Oh, wow. And it was unbelievable to watch that. But I had fallen away. And so what was key was when I went through several sort of life events, I knew then where to go. I knew to go back to the Lord, and that was when I recommitted my life at 30 years old. So I've been saved twice, and I hope I don't need to be saved a third time. So
I've heard you share how a personal crisis kind of led you back to that faith in Christ, and even how your son Riker's diagnosis has helped to strengthen that family faith bond. I've met your wife and your kids. You have an amazing family.
Thank you.
How is that journey? Baseball player to businessman to public servant. How has that shaped your calling for governor? Because that really is a calling. Some people are running for the office, and other people have the calling.
Yeah, that's 1,000% a calling. I mean, to jump into this race was a leap of faith. I mean, I resigned a job that I was in. I had a great salary, benefits, insurance, all those things.
That's tough to do.
And and so we have a great acreage out in Runnels, and I say that we didn't put it at risk. We took a leap of faith. But it's a pure calling, and the Lord called me in this. We jumped in. But my background has perfectly shaped me for this situation. So you mentioned some of the personal crisis that I've been through. I lived a very selfish life. Call it from 14 years old to 30 years old. It was all about me. I'm an athlete, and I wanted my kingdom, and I wanted people to be thinking about me. And when I was drafted in 2002 by the Phillies, I go into professional baseball, and 2 years later, they released me, and I was done. Like, my entire identity was into sports.
Right.
And I say this publicly. I said it earlier today at a luncheon. I said I had a Jesus-sized hole in my heart. And when I recommit my life to Christ, my heart physically changed.
Wow.
And I knew I was going to be living for different purposes. I didn't know what. But my selfish lifestyle and the things that I went through positioned me perfectly to a point where I had to hit my knees. There was nowhere else to go. And so I committed to the Lord. And that moment forced me to then plan and prepare for what the Lord wanted me to do.
There it is.
Not me.
Right.
It was what the Lord wanted me to do.
I wish more people had that perspective too.
Yep.
We always look at the world like almost like in two perspectives, when really it should just be one. This is God's plan. It's God's will. And how do I enter into that? So I love that that's your heart.
Yeah. And it has to be now. I can't live a different way because I've seen the other side, and I don't ever want to see that side again.
Amen.
You know?
Amen.
But I'll say this too. The Lord 16 years ago, when I fully surrendered, he told me, I want you to plan and prepare for high levels of leadership. And that was the catalyst in my life. It was before I was married, before I even met Casey.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, that moment forced me to plan and prepare. So I started studying the history of our country, studying my worldview, studying my faith, became a credentialed minister in the assemblies, followed in my father's footsteps.
Oh, that's so cool.
I haven't become ordained, but I'm certified. Anyway,
Sure.
and that just led me down a path of absolute surrender. And the Lord opened up doors. He closed doors. He put me in front of some of the coolest experiences that I could ever imagine. And I'm to a point now in many spots in my background where I can say that only was because of the Lord.
Right.
I did what I could, but the Lord did the rest.
Yeah. And that's in a sense 20/20 vision, when you can see perfectly, hey, this is God's hand. This is where he's brought me. You know, I've got points and intersections of my own life where, you know, like you, I was running away from God as a young man, and God said, no, I have another plan for you. And he brought me through a whole season of breaking me down in order to build me up and to put me in the place that he could use me. You know, I almost had to die to myself, right?
The ultimate breakdown for me was when, I forget the exact year, but it was right around 2010. I herniated a disc in my back.
Oh, okay.
And if you've had a disc land on your sciatic nerve,
oh man,
it's the most excruciating pain. That sciatic nerve pain goes from the top of your butt down to the bottom of your foot, and it's horrifying. I couldn't move. I had to lay on a couch for months, tried to avoid surgery, ended up with back surgery. So I was literally flat on my back for months. And that was the catalyst for me to finally go, I'm done doing things my way.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. I love how the Lord, you know, will take you out of everything so that he can make you the man that he'll use to put you into everything.
Yep.
You know, let's talk a little bit about your kind of pre-politics life. You know, before state government, you've built businesses. I was doing some research on you. I was actually pretty fascinated. So talk to us about the turkey fan. You built like a turkey decoy company.
Yeah.
And, you know, it sounds like there's some fascinating kind of history to that. And then worked in, of course, within that financial services. Yep. And so you've experienced firsthand the challenges that, you know, I think we face as Iowans in manufacturing. Yep. What lessons from those 18 years as an entrepreneur do you kind of bring to the table? How do you, you know, design tackling Iowa's economic pressure today? Because there's a lot.
Oh, there's a lot. And the beauty of my background and my resume in this candidacy is that I can empathize. Yeah. I can actually empathize with the situations that are going on across the state, whether it be business or even stuff within the healthcare industry. But from a business perspective, I moved from Burlington to Indianola in about 1988, 89. And one of my buddies invented a turkey decoy when we were in high school.
Wow.
And so it was an umbrella with an airbrushed picture of a turkey on it. Oh. And we would hide behind the umbrella. Turkeys would run up and we'd go harvest a turkey and we'd be on down the road. And it was just hilarious. You know, we'd leave study hall or whatever and go kill a turkey and we'd be back at school.
Oh,
and
that's
so,
amazing.
So he put it in his garage, put it in a tube, put it back in his garage. We all go off and do our own things. And then we're telling turkey fan stories at a barbecue. And my wife, she's like, Adam, why don't you help him take that to market? She goes, that's what you do. Because that's what I started working with my father in investment banking. So I learned how businesses grew, how they failed, how to create, you know, expand and scale the enterprise. And so I looked at my buddy. I'm like, I mean, I could help you take. So we went and we found it in his garage. It was in this old dusty tube.
That's awesome.
We pulled out, went down to a patent attorney. The patent attorney freaks out. He's like, this is the holy grail of turkey hunting. Now, this is probably 15 years ago.
Sure.
And from that moment, I wrote a business plan. I wrote a private placement memorandum. I raised the capital. We searched. And what's hilarious is the Democrats try to use this as some sort of skeleton in my closet. But we searched everywhere to find an umbrella manufacturer in the United States.
Yeah.
None in Iowa, none in the Midwest. We couldn't find one. The only one we found was one that manufactures the giant wooden umbrellas for, you know, porches.
Right,
and decks.
yeah.
And so we found a company in Ohio that owned an umbrella manufacturer in China. And so China 80% of our world's umbrellas are manufactured in
Wow.
Umbrella City, China. Which
No, is that really the
yeah,
name?
no, that's what they call it. I don't know what the technical, but they
That's
call it Umbrella
funny.
City. So it broke my heart because we wanted to
Sure.
put an American flag, made in America, on this product, and I never forgot about it. And so once I jumped into the race for governor, that's a big story because it's like, hey, I understand what it's like to try to find manufacturing. What I could have done is I could have raised about $10 million
Right.
and built the mold,
Build your
but
own, yeah.
it just wouldn't. It's impossible to do that.
Yeah.
In the situation
The
we're in.
ROI on that starts to really
Yeah,
thin
there's
out.
no ROI.
Yeah.
But we can change that. We can change that in this state, and I believe fully, from a business perspective, that we can increase manufacturing, we can increase job opportunities by getting more invested into the trades industry.
Right.
And when I say trades, I mean construction trades, I mean ag trades, even healthcare trades. Because what I've seen in the course of being an entrepreneur for 18 years is when business owners face adversity. And right now we're facing adversity in this country,
That's right.
in this state. That's when we innovate because we have to.
Right.
We have no other choice.
Backs against the wall, you start to build.
Yep, you can either crumble or you can push back, and that's
that.
all I've ever done. And so we've got an opportunity right now to actually innovate because we have to. And there is so much infrastructure across the state, so many good businesses across the state. We need to leverage them.
Yeah.
And branch between their industry and other industries. There's a book, it's called The Only Sustainable Edge, John Hagel, John Seeley Brown.
Okay.
It's an older book, but that, like, I read the Bible and I read that book.
Wow, okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it talks about building, creating value where value doesn't exist. And it's through innovation and partnerships and
I
strategic.
mean, that's who we are as a nation. It's who we have been as a nation. And I think to some degree, you can look across the country and we've lost track of that over the years. And we're starting to see a resurgence of that heart.
Yep.
It's kind of the heartbeat of America.
The heartbeat of America.
Man, I love hearing that, you know, and I love hearing you talk about the trades. It seems like they're almost overlooked anymore. You know, we've pushed so many young people into the collegiate realm. And listen, I'm a huge fan of higher education. I went to Arizona State University. Don't hold that against me. I know saying that in Iowa. Anyway, but you know, today you see a lot of young people going off to college and, you know, coming back with just a ton of debt and they still haven't figured out what they're going to do. And they now have a degree that maybe won't even help them.
It's not transferable.
Yeah. In you know, whatever course that they end up taking in their life. And, you know, we have a school here, Calvary Christian Academy, K through 8th grade. And we're working on a plan to launch the next phase with a high school program. And a big part of that is a trade-based program,
That's
you know, where you can, you know, have that trade component where you're still doing math, history, and science and those things, but a lot of hands-on, you know, training with these young people, teaching them, you know, trades. That's the next 6-figure salary, you know.
1,000%, yes.
Yeah.
No, it is. And you're not even, that's not even a talking point. That is fact. I mean, there are businesses out there that are wanting to hire these kids right out of high school. They're willing to train.
Right.
They're willing to create apprenticeship.
Electricians, plumbers,
100%.
HVAC, and there's so many other areas.
And they're cool jobs.
Right.
They're really cool jobs. I say that. I didn't do that. I went to a 4-year college. Not sure what I graduated in because I was there for baseball. But
oh, nice.
But I'm looking back and I see these kids right now and I'm like, guys, the trades are cool.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing to do, to get dirty, to solve problems. And these kids, they will achieve the American dream.
Right.
They'll be the ones that create a new
100%.
business and hire others. And I mean, it's an untapped opportunity, and Iowa has a chance to be a catalyst and frankly, a template for the rest of the country.
I agree. And I love that's your heart. And I think that's really transferable within our own system, within the public system and the private system of education. There's an easy way to implement that. You got to get people behind you. And I think that, you know, you have that heart and ability to do that. You know, you talked a little bit about being drafted by the Phillies, playing pro baseball. I think that's amazing. No doubt that takes a lot of discipline, you know, learning how to work with others. Teamwork's a big part of that, and certainly grit. How does that translate into, you know, your role? You directed the Department of Administrative Services. That's a nice stepping stone into the office of governor. Maybe connect those dots.
Yeah, I tell you, my baseball background combined with my government operational background, it's positioned me to be custom fit for the role of governor. So the baseball side, I learned at a young age how to win. which means I had to learn how to be humble when I
Right.
won, because I also learned
Right.
how to lose.
Sure.
You know,
That's the nature of sports.
I share the story. I was a closer in college, so I was the guy that got the ball at the end of the game.
Wow.
And so the game's on the line. I'm there to save the game,
Wow.
basically. Well, I'll never forget, I was in South Dakota and gave me the ball. Hit comes back to me. I gun it into the stands over the first baseman's head.
Wow.
And that was the best play of my inning. The rest just went straight downhill.
Oh, no.
And we lost the game, which lost our ability to host the conference tournament
Wow.
at Mankato. And I'll never forget, I was so angry. I grabbed my bag
Sure.
and went around behind the bus, and I slammed it on the ground. I didn't think anybody was looking. I looked up, and the Phillies scout was standing there.
Oh, wow.
He's the only one that saw me do that. And when he drafted me, he said, "I will never forget watching you keep your composure until you got around that bus, and you didn't think anybody was watching." He said, "Never forget, somebody's always watching." And I'm like,
Wow.
oh man, like I'll never forget
Important
that.
words to hear.
100%.
Yeah.
And so then, that shaped me. It formed my grit. It formed my determination,
Sure.
how I plan, how I prepare, how I stay humble. And then moving into government operations, it is a nonstop series of problems.
Right.
And what you have to do is form teams and bring in experts. You got to be able to be humble and say, I don't know,
Sure.
but I need you to help me get to this point. And I will take your recommendation, and I'll either agree with it or I won't. And if I don't and I get it wrong, I got to be humble and say, we got to
Right.
shift back to that. But it formed me. Baseball formed me into operations in a way that I don't think anything else could for
Sure.
me, and how my personality is sort of developed, and having nonstop problems in front of me on a regular basis from the government operational perspective.
Right. I can't imagine.
That's what
Yeah.
it's going to be like as governor. I mean, just kind of multiplied by 10. But I learned early how to work with teams, how to form teams, how to bring people in to help solve problems so that we do this together. Because if I'm the smartest guy in the room, we're limited to what I know. And that's
Right.
a problem.
Right.
We can't do that.
And I think a lot of people have a problem bringing in people to work under them that might not necessarily be smarter, but have perspective other than their own, and working ideas that might challenge your thought of how something might go. And a lot of people won't do that because of pride. There's a sense of arrogance.
Yep.
But someone who's willing to do that, lead with humility, and set up a functional government that really raises the standard. That's the next level. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I wasn't even exactly sure what the Department of Administrative Services did, and so I had to do a little research there. But that's a lot of work. You oversaw a lot within
a big deal.
the state government. That's significant.
When I got the call from the governor's office, they said, "We want you to apply for the director of Department of Administrative Services." I said, "What is that?" I hadn't heard of it either.
Yeah.
And so I'm Googling it. I'm like, I don't even know what this means.
Sure.
And I asked them, they didn't know either.
Oh, no.
So they're like, well, you're going to oversee state accounting, state human resources, state procurement, state major maintenance, state all these things.
Right.
And they're like, oh, by the way, there hasn't been a permanent director in place for 4 years. So the
I
team's
didn't know
messy
that.
and there's full of
Oh,
problems.
no.
And I'm like, I'm all in. Like,
Right.
This is perfect.
Oh,
This is
man.
exactly what I'm wired for.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a test like I haven't had before, and it's one that I feel very confident to say that I passed the test.
Yeah.
And it's now time to take what I learned, put it into the position of governor, so that I can cascade down to taxpayers all across the state.
Right. I mean, as the DAS director, you helped implement a lot of government restructuring, streamlined operations. Let's build on that. What specific success, from those 5 years, maybe it's a struggle, what taught you the most about making state government truly serve the people of Iowa? Because I think some people get that wrong and think that the people of Iowa serve the state government.
Yeah.
And yet it's truly the opposite. The government's set up to serve the people. So what is your takeaway from that?
You've identified what I think is the fundamental issue with government across this entire country is that we've let government think that we serve it.
Right.
Government exists to serve us. It exists to punish evil and condone good, but that's to serve us and help free us so that we can do what we're called to do. My sort of vision for my department when I took it over, I got rid of our mission statement and I said, here's what we're going to do. Number one, we're going to do what we can to help Governor Reynolds achieve her goals.
Nice.
That's number one. Number two, we're going to help government agencies achieve their goals and help employees of those agencies achieve their goals.
Wow.
And then number three, we're going to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. So everything we did was through that lens.
Right.
And so if it didn't make sense from those perspectives, we didn't do it. And very quickly, we became known as the fixer inside of state government. I was called the fixer as I would walk around campus.
That's a nice title to bear.
It's a great title because the government doesn't exist
Right.
to do what it's doing. So when things came to us, like we don't know what to do, we went in with that different lens. We said, okay, let's break this down. What is constraining the free market from doing what it can do? What rule can we get rid of? Policy, and we got in front of some of the largest projects that the state has ever tried to complete, and we got them done on time. We got them done on or under budget. Many times. Alignment was one of them. 37 agencies down to 16. My department was the entity that did all the inner workings of that entire project. Took us about a year and a half, but from how we wrote the code all the way to how we execute the accounting strings from the different departments. We did all of that behind the scenes. We got no credit for it. I'm now promoting it obviously on the campaign, but that's not why we did it then. We did it because that's what we do. And it gave me direct line of sight into every single agency, how those dollars are either stewarded or not. It gave me a laundry list of things that we could do better. So when I pulled my team together, and 2 weeks before I resigned my job, I pulled them in a room. I said, keep this confidential. In 2 weeks, I'm resigning, and I'm going to run for governor. And 3 people passed out because everything was going so well. But I said, here's a laundry list of things that I want to do when I come back. And my team, they're amazing. They're like, we'll start working on it now. Because it's stuff we need to do to be stewards of the taxpayer dollar. So yeah, direct purview into many areas of the state that I never would have had that prior to.
Right. And I think that kind of sets you apart when you look at the other candidates. You know, there's some great folks out there, but when it comes to somebody who really knows the inner workings of the government, would you say that there's anybody in there that has had that experience that would transfer? I
say this humbly. There's not another candidate on either side of the platform that could hold a candle to my operational experience. I mean, it sets me above, far above anyone else. I mean, 18 years in business, 5 years running the operations of the state, biblical worldview. I kind of call that the trifecta of a political resume for the conservative sort of movement. But yeah, and I say that it's not to knock the things that others have done. But
there's some really great guys that are running alongside you.
Yeah, but to be able to literally answer a question with a specific scenario of how I would handle that situation. Anybody could ask me any question, and I've not been asked a question so far that I can't point to who I would go to fix it or point to a scenario that I've already been involved in. And I'm not saying they're not out there, but
so just day one, turnkey.
Let's go.
Moving forward.
I know who will be in my cabinet, who will stay. I know who will go. I know who I'll bring in. I'm ready to go. You know, I can operate the state on day one, and I get very excited about that because there's so many cool things that we can do that we're not doing that we can do very, very quickly.
I love that. Let's get into some topics that tend to draw a little bit of line, separate political parties. You know, you've been pretty clear. Abortion's a top issue for you as an individual. You're an advocate for life. You've talked about a life at conception bill. You even talk about wanting to crack down on chemical abortion pills, which I think is of major importance. You know, as a faith-driven leader and father, how would you advance a stronger, you know, kind of, we'll call it a culture of life in Iowa? How do we advance that?
Well, first of all, I love how you call it a culture of life. That's what we need to be talking about. How do we create a culture of life? When I jumped into this race, and I actually said this earlier today, I said, shame on me. I didn't realize how divided the Republican Party was on life. There's division.
It's pretty shocking.
It's shocking. I was blown away. I probably shouldn't have been. But we're arguing about things when what we should be arguing for is a culture of life. I mean, let's start talking about the birth rates in the world and the country and the state. Let's start talking about marriage between a man and a woman at a younger age so that you can have children and those children, you can have lots of children. Like, we need to be talking about a culture of life and focus all of our arguments on how do we create a culture of life so that kids think it's cool to get married and have other kids.
Man, like, go back to the American dream. That was the American dream.
That was the American dream. And we've lost that because I think, frankly, I'll say it, I don't know that I've said this on the trail, but I think the enemy has done a great job of weaving its way into, call it our movement, call it our party.
I agree.
And it's created division. And division is what breaks everything down. And if we can't come together and rally around a single point, we're in trouble. So let's rally around a culture of life, and let's talk about that. Let's surround young mothers. Let's surround young fathers. we forget to talk about the father.
That's a great point.
Why are we not rallying around the young men that put themselves into this situation too, to help them become better men so that they can be the leaders of their home?
Right.
We talk about surrounding the young women, 100%, absolutely.
Yes.
But get the man.
Right.
And bring him in and tell him to quit being a doofus, and that's time to do your job.
You have so many homes, these single mom homes, and actually 3 emails today just here within our church community of single moms in the Cedar Rapids area who are reaching out in need of help. One specifically in an abusive situation, and she's about to lose her car. She has 3 children, and it's but coming alongside of her, absolutely. We've already started that process. But how do we come alongside that man in her life and meet him where he's at and bring the fear of God in, but also let's come alongside. And, the Bible says, actually we see it in 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians, there's a need for man to be a worker. It says, if you work with your hands, you have need of nothing. If you don't work, you shouldn't eat,
Right. No, I just read it in Proverbs today.
I love it. But there's that side where we're not talking about those things anymore. And we're not teaching young men to love their wives and, stand in that gap and lay down their lives. I mean, Christ is the example for us as husbands. We're supposed to lay down our lives for our wives as he did for his church. And young men are living for themselves. Not all young men. There's some amazing young men out there.
But a lot of them are.
How do we, meet the need of those guys while coming alongside the ladies? And I think that's a real formula to solve. There's a lady in our church, Rachel Owen, who helped start the Informed Choices medical clinics and has been wildly successful. I think the abortion rate in Iowa was cut in half over the years that they were building those out. And we've seen incredible things being done there. And I know she's kind of in a transition. Maybe she'd be somebody to bring on to the team.
Bring it in. Bring it in. I mean, again, it's cascading that message in broadcasting that culture of life. Because look, I was selfish. I was arrogant. I could have cared less about getting married. It was all about me. And it wasn't until you mentioned the fear of the Lord. I'll never forget it. I was at my former church in Indianola. I'm now in Pleasant Hill. And the fear of the Lord gripped me. Yeah. And it was a holy fear. Right. It was a reverent fear. Right. And once that fear of the Lord, I don't want to make him mad. At the time I was drinking, I was chewing tobacco, I was smoking cigars, and it was like cold turkey, done, gone.
Wow, praise the Lord.
It was just like, I'm not even going to do that because I didn't want to make the Lord mad.
There you go.
From a reverent perspective.
We're not worried he's going to squash us like a bug from heaven.
Right.
But there's that heart's desire to honor him. Actually, my shirt I'm wearing today says, fear God, not man. We have to learn that concept sometimes ourselves in order to truly teach it to the next generation. Yep. And there's just a lot of people out there that are losing track of that. But being able to restore some of that within our nation, but it has to start in our community, within our state. And again, at that grassroots level where, the rubber hits the road, coming alongside these families. And I think that's a big part of it because the abortion conversation, it's born from the unexpected pregnancy conversation. And a lot of these young men are going, I'm not ready to be a dad. This is what you should do. And a lot of these young ladies are responding to that with, I have no support. So how do we come alongside of them? Because it's not just about stopping abortion in its tracks. It's about also meeting the families where they're at and helping them become families, become good parents.
Yeah. To me, that comes back to the local church.
I love that answer.
I mean, the local church, not your church, but the local church
the
in
church
general,
at large,
has abdicated its responsibility. For some reason, we think that the government should be the one stepping in and running these programs and helping these programs. And I'll tell you right now, the government is terrible at it. The government's terrible at it. Yeah. What the government should do is figure out how to come alongside a local church and say, what can we do to clear a path for you to better serve your community, to better serve these young women, these young men, and bring them in? Because the local church, has stopped speaking truth. Yeah, they're trying to just say whatever's going to tickle someone's ears to keep them in the pew or the bench or the chair or whatever it is. Yeah. We need to be speaking biblical truth. Yep. And once we have the heart of truth in our sort of service model, then it's okay. We're going to start taking care of the community and government. What can you do to help us by getting out of our way and putting us in front of these situations so we can better serve?
I love that.
I lay it at the feet of the local church, and I will say this until I'm blue in the face. We got to get the government out of the way. Yeah. Now, What programs can we help institute? I don't know, but it's got to be led by the community and not the government.
When Governor DeSantis was coming through from Florida during the presidential race, I had the opportunity to sit down with he and his wife 3 or 4 times, actually, and they implemented a program almost like what you're talking about there in Florida, where the state came alongside the churches to build, really, within the church, there were advocates for each area of the community. And when a phone call came in, or when a service was given to a single mom or a family in need, there was, in a sense, kind of a social worker style role that was attached to that, but also they were immediately attached to someone within the local church. And the two worked together, and they saw that the government started to see a lot less repeat needs because the church was coming in, and within that, the women's ministries are making meals and, helping the moms, teach them, in a sense, how to raise those kids. And,
to me, it comes down to connection. It comes down to connection and relationship. And so at my church in Pleasant Hill, we have connect groups. So if you're new to the church, there's 4 classes that you go to. So you get an understanding of our beliefs, you get an understanding of how we operate, what ministry activities you can get involved in. And then you get involved in connect groups, which are at people's homes. You get to know
we call them growth groups.
But and then it creates relationship. I believe in this situation for young families, young women, young men, whomever it is, the government should function as a connector to relationship. The government shouldn't be the solution, but how do we connect people when they come to the state and ask for help? How do we connect them to the actual experts and actual resources that are going to create long-term relationship that are actually going to help them long-term?
Right.
The government should connect. It shouldn't try to solve problems.
Man, I'll tell you what, that's all, that's the foundation of it right there. And then building on that, you'd really see this beautiful picture of the family unit changing. And, just even listening to you over the last few months as you've gone around and talked and some of the debates, it's clear that, you put a strong emphasis on pro-family, promoting marriage. We've even talked about that already here, but this is a time when a lot of folks feel like traditional family structures are under pressure, even almost a thing of the past. And what specific policies could you pursue as governor to strengthen marriage between one man, one woman, encourage that family formation, support parents raising children? Yeah. And I think there's an education, portion of that conversation that we could kind of walk into.
100%. So, and I could go several different avenues with this, but number one, I'm a huge advocate for school choice in the ESA program. Like, we need to protect that, number one. There is a Democrat that will not protect it.
Yes, he's been really open.
There's a Republican that doesn't fully understand what he's saying when he says certain things
like that's
about
true,
it.
Yes.
I won't lay any names out.
Yeah.
But we have to protect it. It's
I've invited them both onto the program, by the way. And if you are interested in hearing from them and you have a connection, please let them know.
Prove me wrong.
Let's have that conversation.
But we have to protect it because parents having the ability to choose how their kids are going to be raised and taught is absolutely critical. It's fundamental, foundational to the history of the country.
Right.
Other states right now are copying and pasting this legislation into their states. It's wildly successful.
Wow.
Now, I am not anti-public school, and I'm going to go back to your comment about education for the culture of all these different things. Right now, our public schools, I'll just say it, there's more focus on indoctrination than education.
That's right.
That's why school choice in the ESA program is so wildly popular. Parents are sick of their kids coming home thinking they can be the opposite gender.
Right.
People say, oh, you're just making it. No, my 2 boys go to public school. We go, so I can empathize in these situations. In preschool, when my 10-year-old was 4 years old, and there's 3 and 4-year-olds in preschool, they sent home a note saying they're going to read a book called Jacob's New Dress. And the book is a boy thinks he should be a girl. At the end of the book, he's wearing dresses, and parents and him, they finally feel alive. My wife was inside that school. I couldn't even hold the door open for him. She's flying in there.
I love it.
And we said, you're not reading that book.
Yeah.
We'll pull Riker out of there if we have to. Well, is this a religious thing? No, it's a developmental thing.
Yeah, right.
I can make it religious all day long.
Sure.
They didn't read the book. So 1, we have to be paying attention to what's being taught to our kids in public schools. But 2, we need to give public schools an actual chance to compete.
Yeah.
And we need to remove the Common Core, ridiculous requirements, those standards, the DEI strategy, the administrative bloat, and we need to go to classical education in our public schools. It's what's are making the independent, private, and Christian schools so successful right now. And there's several states that have implemented classical education. We have to go back to that route. And I would even say this: we need to find ways to get Bible and prayer back into school. LifeWise Academy is just one organization that is setting up infrastructure all across the state. It's working in Ohio, where they take kids from a public school for an hour, hour and a half. I believe it's once a week. They take them off-site. They teach them a Bible class, and they bring them back to public schools.
With parent permission.
With parent permission.
Yes.
Yep. Those schools see a dramatic increase in test scores and a dramatic decrease in bad behavior.
Oh, man.
We need Bible back in schools. We need prayer back in schools. We need classical education back in schools. Because I'm not anti-public school. We have an opportunity to help.
Yeah.
And so that type of education is going to, from my perspective, also include a culture of life, a culture of family, a culture of building communities, because that's how we were founded.
Sure.
Why not go back to what worked?
Right. Yeah. And it's not forcing religion down the throats of children. It's giving them an opportunity to learn about something.
Yep.
I've even been an advocate, at least teach creation alongside of evolution and let the kids make their own choice. Yeah. When you hear them both laid out side by side, it's pretty easy to go, well, one seems pretty reasonable creation and the other one is a wild stretch of the imagination. Yep. But when evolution is taught as fact, when Darwin himself, close to the end of his life, backed off a lot of what he was teaching, it's strange to me that they're even allowed to teach those kinds of things as substantive facts. But that's the culture that we live in, and I would agree that our public school systems have seen better days. I grew up in Arizona, and I grew up taking the Iowa assessment tests in Arizona. That was the standard of education across the nation, I'm sure. I remember as a high school student meeting somebody from Iowa and going, oh, you must be the smartest person in the school. You're from Iowa? Like, it was just, a simple thought. Well, you must be more educated. You're from the state of Iowa. But we've seen a movement away from the traditional forms of education that made the system here so strong. And now in other states that used to lack education because of programs like the ESAs, actually, currently Arizona has STOs, state tuition organizations, and they have ESAs. And at the beginning of each year, the parents have to choose for their student which direction to go. And one has a little bit more legwork, but has more longer lasting effects, where you can even use some of that for private colleges and things, whereas the ESA programs are just straight high school or elementary and that kind of thing. But what you found is within that program, and this is dating back over 20 years, Arizona was so low on the education chart in this country, but because they challenged the public school system, all of a sudden the public school realized they had to fight for the students. And boy, capitalism came into effect.
When your back's against the wall and you have to innovate, that's what happens. It goes back to even business. I mean, that's where we're at. No, you're 100%. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this, because I actually got an email yesterday or 2 days ago from a conservative Republican teacher. And they were frustrated with my stance on school choice in the ESA program. And I just, every time I have to be clear, I'm not anti-public. My kids go to public school.
Right.
I empathize with these teachers because I talk to them when they tell me, hey, we're not allowed to teach and discipline the way that we know to teach and discipline.
Right.
That's a problem. We're here to clear a path for teachers to actually be able to teach and kids to actually be able to learn. And that's the mission.
And that's the thing. Like, here at Calvary Christian Academy, we have an incredible teaching staff. And for the record, I also know amazing men and women of faith that are incredible teachers within the public school system.
Yes.
Administrators, leaders, we're not down on the public school system, just part of what's coming out of it. But a lot of the teachers that we interviewed, for the few roles that we had, were just K through 8th here. So it's not like we have 10 classes for each, like a typical public school or whatever. But we were interviewing tons of people almost begging to come out of the public school system. We're not offering IPERS. We don't have health care. I mean, we weren't even sure. I'm going to be completely transparent with you. This was before we even knew if students would enroll.
Right.
We were just in faith hiring people. And
Amen.
I was shocked as to how much people were willing to and wanting to walk away from to get into an environment where they might not be abused by students
Yep.
or where they were able to actually reference their
Yep.
faith, share a little biblical worldview, that, biblical lens. It is important to be able to allow parents to make that choice, how their children will be educated. And I love hearing that.
Yeah.
That's your heart. Let's talk taxes.
Yeah.
Obviously, a big deal for a lot of people out there. This week, Governor Reynolds even announced a plan to lower property taxes, or maybe signed a bill to do that.
Signed the bill. Yeah, I want to say yesterday or
it was
so.
just right around the corner. So obviously, property taxes in Iowa are pretty high. Actually, it was the first thing that gave me sticker shock in this state, because Arizona is a lot lower, but you do have a lot more people in a area.
There's other ways to collect taxes in other states, and so I've been through 3 now times the summary of the property tax bill that was just signed that will go into law. And I've talked to 3 legislators that were embedded into the writing of that bill. And I believe them, and I believe what I read, that this is a good step forward.
Sure.
I don't think this is the solution.
Yeah.
I think we've got
I gave it a cursory read, and I thought, I don't know what everybody's making such a stink about. It's not really that huge of a change.
Right. We'll see an impact. There's some tax credit opportunities and different things that are, for me, it's not institutional. It's not it's not going to change the world. What I want to approach immediately is government spend. I want to lower taxes. I want to lower income taxes. I want to lower property taxes. I want to low as low as we can go. But if we don't start attacking government spend,
right,
we're in trouble.
Yeah.
We'll never be able to decrease. And if we decrease, we're eventually going to have to increase because our spend keeps going up.
Sure.
I saw firsthand in my role with the governor's office how the government spends too much money.
Yeah.
I zeroed out my budget one year. We found $500,000 in unnecessary spending that we're in my little old apartment.
Wow.
We have a spending problem in government. And so I love the fact that we're trying to take steps forward on property tax, but I don't love the fact that we're not trying to crush spend. We need to zero out budgets in cities, in counties, in schools, so that they're not able to take the same budget from last year, plug it in this year, and just plus it up a couple points with no transparency, no accountability. And then what will happen is when you create that transparency and accountability, if you have people in the communities that are paying attention, that will expose where their dollars are going, and that you can actually implement change by not electing the same people to office. You got to bring the right people into office.
Yeah.
I'm all about local control. I don't want this big bad state to come in and tell you what to do. But until we start crushing government spend, we can talk lowering taxes all day long, but it won't be possible because our spend continues to increase, and we've got to stop that, and we can stop that because I've done it and I've seen it, and we can do it again.
Yeah, and I think to some degree that's an issue of the governor's office being able to work functionally with like the state auditor's office and things of that nature, and in a cohesive fashion to approach the issues. And, it seems like at least you look at some of the city and town, spending, and it's almost like they're creating budgets for, whatever they were issued the previous year, and let's go ahead and think a 2 or 10% increase, and then we'll create a budget that will fit within that, rather than looking at, let's work on our budget, and then we'll actually, be able to cut our spending. Yeah, I mean,
what are the essential services that we need to serve our community? And that's where the zero-based budgeting comes into play. You have to defend why you want the money to do the following things.
Okay.
So, and one thing I see is the administrative cost of cities, counties, and schools, and even the executive branch, has skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Administratively. So it means those resources don't hit the critical services that we need. So you shut down a park, you shut down your snow plows, you don't put as much, brine out on the road, like because you got to pay for all the administrative bloat.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's craziness.
And I think that's true within the public school system
100%.
as well. I mean, some of the superintendent salaries that were posted over this last year, I was blown away by.
Yeah.
And then on top of their salaries, clothing allowances and things where you're going, how does that even fit into this?
Their retirements. I mean, it's more than plus 40% of their salary.
Yeah.
And then you add things in like, and this is still craziness to me, Ian Roberts, the former superintendent of the Des Moines Public Schools, criminal, illegal alien, hired. His salary was over $300,000 a year, plus, all these different perks and bennies and all these things. And so it comes out, he tries to evade police. He gets arrested. He's still sitting in jail. He's writing a book now, which blows my mind.
Unbelievable.
But then the Des Moines School Board comes out with a $200+ million bond referendum to fund reimagining public school education. And it passed.
Oh, my goodness.
At 73%.
Wow.
What is wrong with people?
Yeah.
You just had, they can't hire somebody correctly, let alone spend your money correctly. And you wonder why your property taxes are going up? Yeah. That's what's happening right now. So we need to inform the electorate as well as create an opportunity for transparency and accountability so we crush this spend. We have to.
There was a story for one of our local school districts here in the area, a high school that was building a new addition to their gymnasium and football area. And their dollar amounts, the University of Iowa had built almost an identical deal, and it was like 25% of the cost of what they were doing at the high school. And the story was, well, they had all of that money to spend, so they were just looking to, throw it out as like build the biggest, fanciest, whatever they could. And you just go, that's why we're in such trouble here.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It drives me. My wife sat on a board for a state entity years ago, and she left the board because in a board meeting, they said, if we don't spend this money, we won't get it next year.
Yep.
So we just got to say, hey, you get $500,000. I forget what the dollar amount was. And my wife's like, no, I'm not signing off on that.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
And I think there's a lot of frustration even within that, because people will show up at the school board meetings when these kinds of decisions are being made, and there'll be this long line. I myself will go down and sign on to speak, and you wait for hours at times to get your chance. And then the school board members, they're playing tic-tac-toe. They're goofing off. They won't make eye contact with you. They're not required to respond or even to pay attention. And I think that for the most part, people are starting to check out. And it kind of brings us back to the school choice program. But if we were able to get a more appropriate interaction between the citizens and those that are actually at that community level running these schools, man, imagine the kind of success that we could have. That really
absolutely
would be
amazing.
So property taxes. I mean, just taxes in general. I love that let's cut it down. But you can't just cut taxes without crushing spending, and that makes a ton of sense to me.
Yep.
As a credentialed minister and deacon, actually, who's served in church leadership, how do you navigate the intersection of personal faith conviction with governing for all Iowans? Because let's face it, not all Iowans are Christians, and that's okay. The Christian faith isn't to be shoved down anyone's throat, and we agree on that. So how do you rule over Iowa? How do you govern Iowa with that personal faith conviction?
Yeah. I'll give a couple angles to that. Number one, when I started studying the history of the country, and when you look at the moral fabric of this country,
thank you.
It is faith-based. It's Christian. It's Christianity. Yeah. I mean, our Constitution, our Declaration, it is fully founded in Christian values, morals, ethics. Now, that means that people are allowed to worship freely. You're not forcing it upon them.
Right.
But foundationally, that's why we exist as a country.
Amen.
So you kind of scratch that off the list because no one can disprove that. I just got to read a couple documents. Okay, yeah, we are a Christian nation.
Right. They'll still try to argue. But.
Right. They'll say, but American exceptionalism was, I believe, it was de Tocqueville that said it, that America is exceptional because the inner workings of Christianity within every single document that exists. You got that. So you move that off the table. Then next is, okay, how do you operate as a leader?
Yeah.
How do you operate without jamming something down somebody's throat and forcing them to believe? You operate with consistent decision-making, consistent values, consistent principles across the board. And in my role, I like to share this story. My role at DAS, people knew where I stood. They knew my foundation. They knew I was a credentialed minister. But then they also saw me make decisions that aligned with what I said I was.
Amen.
And so they appreciated that. They may not have agreed with my doctrine, but they agreed with how I made decisions. And there were many moments where I could have compromised, but I didn't. I put my job at risk. I put my family, at risk.
Sure.
And I would refuse to do things that didn't make sense and align with my faith or just the overall business principle that we operate on. So they saw that over and over and over again. Then when they would face a constraint, whether personal or professional, they'd come to me and say, hey, can you pray for me?
Wow, isn't
Like,
that
yeah,
great?
absolutely. So come on in. So we'd pray and we'd talk. And then right before I resigned, one of my leadership team members has a child that's transgender. Now, obviously, we didn't see eye to eye,
Sure.
sort of whatever on that. But right before I resigned, they came in. They said, "I think I need to start going to church."
Wow.
And I said, "That's awesome."
Yeah.
And I knew, generally speaking, where they lived. And I said, I would approach these churches,
Yeah.
attend 4 times, and just kind of
Yep.
go and get used to it and
Yeah.
see. And then I resigned. So I don't know, like, whatever
How that
happened
went,
with that. But if you understand and are willing to accept that we exist as a Christian nation, which we are,
Yep.
you can't deny it. But then if you behave and operate the way Christ wants you to behave and operate, you're going to get sort of both sides of that coin, and people will say, okay, I may disagree with you on these things, but I appreciate your integrity, I appreciate your approach, and I appreciate that you're going to do things from what you feel is the best possible way to do
Right.
them, and you don't back down from it. About the time you compromise, throw that all away, you're done.
Amen. So we're starting to run thin on time here. Let's look ahead. What's your biggest hope for Iowa families, maybe 5 or 10 years from now, under leadership that puts faith, family, and freedom first?
I want families to eat together again.
Oh, yeah.
I want them to sit down at the dinner table, get the screens away. Parents, kids, grandparents, throw your phones off to the side, turn your TV off, sit down at the dinner table, eat together, ask each other questions, create challenges within a family to go outside and spend time together. Travel the state of Iowa.
Yeah.
One thing
It's
we
a
want.
beautiful
It's
state.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And there's tons of culture and tons of things
Yeah.
that you can find, that you can learn. There's some cool things that have
I
happened
don't think
in
Iowa gets the kind of credit that it deserves.
Yep.
It's often talked about as the flyover state, and I'll be honest, I've said it myself.
Yep.
Primarily before I moved here.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't think I've told you the story, but in Hawaii on my honeymoon, 27 years ago almost now, my wife said, "Hey, would you ever think about moving to the Midwest?" And we were living in Arizona at the time, and I literally, it wasn't these exact words, but something to the effect of, "Get behind me, Satan." Like, what are you talking about? First of all, why didn't that come up in premarital? Like,
Yeah.
it to me
should have
wasn't.
come up in marriage counseling,
Yeah, like,
pre-marriage counseling.
It was a shock to my system. But being here now for 17 years, I'm in love with this state.
amazing.
I'm in love with the people, and it is beautiful, and it doesn't get the credit that it deserves.
And there's tons of opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, kind of going back to that, George Foreman, the world champion
Yeah.
boxer, is buried in Sioux City, Iowa.
I did not know that.
I just learned this the other day. He wanted to be buried in Iowa, in Sioux City, because he said it's the most peace, the most joy, the greatest people he's ever met.
Wow.
And so he's buried there, and his family came and they just dedicated his grave.
That's incredible.
And that's what Iowa is. And we can promote that as a state, but we have to get families to realize it's more important to be talking together, to be
Right.
listening to each other, to understand each other's problems. If you eat together, you're going to pray together. You pray together, you're going to play together. And then all of a sudden, that's going to cascade into a better family unit. You're going to start, you're going to go outside. You're not going to need the screen time all the time.
Right. Oh my
I would
goodness.
love to get that going right out of the gate. My wife's fired up about it. She wants to be first lady to implement all these plans and
Yeah, that's
strategies
so
for
cool.
the family. And we got others across the state that are ready to pick that up too. But yeah, I want to see family units coming back together.
Man, your vision for Iowa is an exciting vision.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we ran out of time. We're going to have to wrap up our conversation with Adam Steen, candidate for governor of Iowa. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your heart for your family and for the state of Iowa. Certainly, listeners, I hope this conversation has encouraged you, given you something real to think about and to pray about. Adam, if folks want to learn more about you, how do they connect with you?
Yeah, Jeremy, thank you. AdamSteen.com. AdamSteen.com.
Nice and simple, folks. I'd encourage you to get out there and maybe join Adam at an upcoming event. Take some time to get to know him. Certainly, there's a lot of other candidates out there, and I think it's important to have all of those conversations. But at the end of the day, get to your knees, go to prayer, and ask God to lead this state into that next place that He's called us to be. Thanks so much for being a part of Grassroots Iowa. We're going to be back next time with more candid conversations at the crossroads of faith and politics. I'm Jeremy Higgins. Keep seeking truth, keep loving your neighbor, and you know what? God bless Iowa. Let's talk soon.